Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. I'm here with some amazing people to discuss the second book of the Dark Tower series, The Drawing of the Three. And I don't know about you guys, but I am really excited. If there has ever been a book, two books that are completely different in the same series, I don't think I've ever read them before. So I'm sure we all have lots of thoughts here. Let's go really quick through some introductions. So some of you have never been on my channel before, starting with you, Maza.
Yeah, guys, so I'm Maza. Yeah, it's the first time. It's so cool to make it like the first time I'm here to make it a Stephen King series, kind of, which is like, I feel like for a lot of Stephen King fans, this is like, I feel like this is going to be such a horrible comparison, but like, this is like the Bible for constant readers. Like, the whole Dark Tower series is just like the holy grail for us. So I think it's awesome that the first time I'm in your channel and with you guys, it's for the discussion of a Dark Tower book. But yeah, guys, I'm Masa BookTuber. I have a BookTube channel. You guys can find me as Masa BookTuber. And yeah, like I said, I'm a really big constant reader, but I'm also getting into fantasy and recently into a lot of manga too.
Hi, I'm Summer, and I have a channel called Cozy Reading with Quaker Cats. And yeah, it's my first time on Stacy's channel.
Yes. Hopefully not the last for either of you.
No.
Steve and Brandy have been here many times.
So I'm Steve. I have a channel, Steve Talks Books, and this is my wife, Brandy. And we are the newbies in the group, or some of the newbies. So I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm Jeff Lane. I'm like that bit of mold that keeps showing up in the corner of your shower. That on Stacy's channel, I pop up every once in a while, and she just can't get rid of me. But
always a pleasure.
Thanks, Stacy. I write books that are similar, probably just similar to Stephen King, in the speculative thriller category, such as One Way and the Champion Saga, This Paper World, This Burning World, and I just have one question for you all. Did it chuck?
Oh my God. I kept waiting in the whole book for that to be explained to me. We'll get there. So we've got a few people here already on here. We got Josh. Welcome, Josh. I'm glad you could join us. And David.
Oh.
And of course, Raul.
He's only here for Maza, so.
Yeah. Marzipan. Okay, I get it.
Have you guys ever had one? It's a Mexican candy, and it's like I think it's just like peanut butter and like a bunch of other stuff mixed into.
Oh, you got me on peanut butter.
Yeah.
Oh, they're delicious. They really are.
Yeah, I can't eat that kind of stuff because I'll get diabetes or something. So.
Instant diabetes.
I can't do that anymore.
All right, so let's first talk about your non-spoiler thoughts. What did you think? No ratings. We'll leave that to the end. But just tell me what you thought. I'm going to start with Steve and Brandy since this is their first time reading The Drawing of the Three. So, Steve, what were your thoughts of this book?
I liked it a lot more than The Gunslinger, but I will say that The Gunslinger started making a little bit more sense. Not totally, I mean, but they started to come together a little bit more, so it's kind of made a few connections. But I really enjoyed the writing, and the story was good. I mean,
we're hearing a little bit of an echo.
Am I in?
Is it here? Is it us? The
No.
echo?
I don't hear it anymore.
So yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a good book. I'm
I
excited for the rest of the series. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I loved it. I was so nervous because I had a really rough time getting through the Gunslinger. But now I can see what everybody was talking about appreciating the Gunslinger more, because I'm glad I had that, even though it was really weird, that foundation of Roland and just the world he's from, and how, because it made it so much more funny when you read about him in this book. And so I don't know, I just had a great time with it. I did too, like Stacy, listen to the audiobook, and it was awesome. But I did both. I read and I did the audiobook, and I'm so glad I did. And I had to make Steve listen to at least a little bit of it because it was just so good.
Yeah, yeah, it was. So Maza, since you were not here for the Gunslinger, you have to tell us about both. What were your thoughts of the Gunslinger and versus this book?
So I think the Gunslinger. I haven't finished the series. I'm on book 5. And I stopped because I was like, oh, I'm gonna read it with you guys, so it's perfect. So I don't know if like the whole completion of the series will make the book better, but for now, uh the Gunslinger and the girl who loved Tom Gordon are like my worst Stephen King book reads. I don't know, when I read the Gunslinger, it was so short of a book that I was just like, okay, I'm gonna get through this and it's gonna be fun, especially because I have the cover with him looking all badass and like he just looked like a straight up gunslinger. And I was just like, oh, this is gonna be so much fun. I got into it, and this is one of the few books that I find myself going back and reading over and over again. I was like, I don't know what you're saying. Like, it didn't really it made sense, but at the same time, I was like, what are you talking about? Because it would be kind of like jumbled. Like I felt like Stephen King was just putting like all his like I don't know like thoughts into like one page, and it was just too much for me. And I was like, okay, you need to calm down a little bit. And then when I got to Dawn of the Three, I was like, okay, I'm going to keep pushing forward because I have to read this series because a lot of people say that it's good. But I've heard that a lot of people were saying that the first book was just like terrible, like to get over it, just to read it because he wasn't going to keep reading. I mean, writing after the Gunslinger, it was just going to be the one book and just leave it at that, I think. And then he started writing the Dawn of the Three. So this one is where you meet like the whole cast, and I feel like that's what I needed, more characters, because I'm one of those readers that is like character driven. Like I want to know what every character is feeling, and just seeing like the POV of the Gunslinger was okay, but in this book I felt like the Drawing of the Three picked up tremendously. Like I was just like, okay, I'm here for this. Like now I can start seeing the world a lot more, and I felt like it just felt a lot more vivid and stuff, because I feel like in the Gunslinger it was a little bit too like shallow. Like I was like, where are you? Like I kind of saw the world a little bit, but it didn't give me much as for like the Drawing of the Three was like super good. I feel like, and especially because the Drawing of the Three was my first book review, like I really was like really intensely reading it and like taking notes and stuff.
That's awesome. So Summer, this was your second time reading this?
Yes. It was my favorite the first time I read it, and it did not disappoint the second time through the reread. I absolutely love this book. My favorite character is introduced, and yeah, I'm excited to talk about spoilers.
I can't wait. And Jeff, I'm sure you have lots of notes to share with us today.
Yeah, they're all in my head, but yeah, I love this book too. This is my second time reading it this year, actually. So I'm a little bit of what they call a Dark Tower junkie. Eddie might say it's got me through the bag and back, or whatever he says. Yeah, I love this book. I think this is where the adventure takes off. I think this is where Stephen King is a fully fledged mega commercial success writer, and I think that's some of the difference that we're seeing from the Dark Tower to this book. He wrote the Dark Tower when he was 19, and since I think he wrote this one in 86, 87, something like that. So he had some of his big mega hits come out at this point. So he was officially Stephen King when he picked up this journey, and I think you can tell it's action packed, it's cinematic, it has a good flow. And though there's a lot of, there are some flashbacks in it, it is a much more straightforward story, in that the present story flows and we're much more with the Gunslinger and his new companions that he's drawing in the present, with them kind of telling stories of their past, versus the Gunslinger jumped around quite a bit in terms of what time frame you were in. So I think that helps people like this story a lot more too. Plus, it's just action packed and lots of cool stuff. Our world, their world, just oh man, it's a great book.
I think cinematic is a great word to describe this book. I felt like it was two different authors. Honestly, I did not feel like I was reading the same author. So you could see that Stephen King had definitely improved. I don't want to say improved, because there are a lot of people who actually really like the Gunslinger. I don't know if there are people that liked it the first time they read it. There are people that like it. So he's changed as a writer, and I loved it. So honestly, I had to get out the tabs and mark some stuff so we can have a really good conversation today, because there was so much that happened in this. It was a great story, but after our conversation of the Gunslinger, I started picking up on more stuff here. I actually went back and skimmed through the Gunslinger again before I started this, because, well, actually it was in the middle of it, because I'd forgotten about what the cards meant. So when he talks to the Oracle and she tells him about, what was going to happen, and then you get the cards at the end and how they all I had to go back and read those parts again, because I was like, I want to make sure I remember this, because now that it's coming to that point, especially when you meet a couple of characters and you remember about the cards in the Gunslinger. So I absolutely loved it. There was only a few things that kept it from being a 5-star for me. So I gave it a 4. Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to talk ratings. Here I go. It was so. One of the things I love about Stephen King is his characters. He is excellent at writing characters that you just can't forget. And this is by no means any different. And so it was very action-packed, and it wasn't long-winded like some of his other more popular books. And so it felt very concise, there wasn't a point in the book where it didn't feel like you were floating, like it was loose. It's like, okay, I'm reading this. I don't know what it has to do with the story. Where some of his bigger books, you tend to feel that way at some point, just disjointed from the story. That was not the case here. And I loved it. I can't wait to talk spoilers so we can get into a little bit more about why we all loved it, what our favorite parts are. But we've got some comments here before we move on to the next part. And we've got Knitting Books has joined us.
Hi, Christina.
Book Time with Elvis. Thank you so much for joining.
I knew he wasn't dead.
So Knitting in Books says, I did like the Gunslinger, but I like jumpy puzzling narratives, and I like to solve the puzzle.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just really feel like after our discussion about the Gunslinger, just talking to you all about it really changed my view about it, and I went back like Stacy did, and I listened to it before I started the drawing of the 3 again. So.
Well, I also wanted to be able to tie some of those things from the Gunslinger into this book, and I didn't feel like I remembered enough. It moved around a lot. So there were things you're like, is this important? Is this not important? When is this important? I don't know. Maybe I have to read the Gunslinger before every book now.
That's why I say it's good to come around and read it at the very end. So after you finish book 7, just cap it off with the Gunslinger at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see all the pieces kind of come together.
So Raoul says the Gunslinger didn't give what was meant to be gave. I don't know if that's true. Having now read the drawing of the 3, I do think that what he did in the Gunslinger was very much on purpose, and that was what he meant to do. But I also think there was a big time frame between when the Gunslinger was originally written and when this happened. It makes me wonder what came first. Like, did he have the whole Dark Tower series, figured out how he was going to do it in his head when he wrote the Gunslinger, or is he kind of just? So it feels like it was meant to be, but maybe when he first wrote it, it wasn't.
I think it wasn't, just because he wasn't even gonna finish writing it. I think after his accident, that's when he was like, oh, I'm finally gonna get down and finish this, because I think he had like a whole life. I don't know what they're called, like where like, oh, the light flashed into his eyes, I guess. So he was like, I gotta finish this series, because I know when he was like, I think he stopped. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but I think after the Wastelands, he wasn't gonna write it. He hadn't written anything else, and then he had his accident, and people were like from death row, people that were like in their 80s, 90s were sending him letters telling him, hey, can you just tell me the ending of the Dark Tower? And he was like, I can't give you the ending because I don't even have the ending yet.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, I thought that was so crazy for someone in death row to be sending him a letter saying, I need to know, because they're in death row, so like they're gonna so they need to know the ending.
Someone, is that a motivation? Someone in death row, like, I better write that book for this person in death row.
Somebody needs to write a letter to George R.R. Martin.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure he's gotten 1 or 2 at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe.
We'll drive up to Santa Fe and knock on his door.
Yeah.
I will say, but what you're talking about here, he does address some of those things in both either the forewords or the afterwards of many of the books.
Yeah.
So if you were the type that skips those types of things, those author's note type things, I wouldn't in the case of this series, because he is in real time, as of the time of writing each of these things, he does tell you where he's at in his thought process and his writing process. And I think at the end of this one, he even says, I think it's going to be 6 or 7 books. So he kind of knows that part. He tells you, I think the 4th book is going to be kind of a prequel. So he had loose outlines, at least, of what the structure was going to be, maybe not details and where it was going.
And he even says, like, I don't even know if Roland's going to be the one that makes it to the Dark Tower, or, you know, so those little chunks at the end, he gives away some stuff.
Yeah. And you guys talked about going back to the Gunslinger as well. His argument at the beginning does a really good job of recapping kind of the salient points of the Gunslinger. And it kind of reminds me of what they do with serialized TV nowadays, where they'll say previously on, and they show you just enough key things that you know, yes, I do remember that scene from 4 episodes ago, but the reason why they're showing me it now is because it must mean something to this episode. And I think he's doing that. He also did it for a very practical reason, because this was like the middle of the mid 80s. We didn't have Wikipedia. We didn't have, podcasts and YouTube videos that we could go get quick summaries of a book that came out 7 years ago before we start reading the next book. So he was doing, in essence, what the internet does today, and kind of like, all right, previously on, now you're ready to start this story.
Yeah, but it did make me go, oh, I don't remember that part. And I had to go back and read that section again in the book to get the full context. So it also kind of went, oh man, I just read that last month. How did I miss that? So before we move on to spoilers, for those that are joining us that have not yet read The Drawing of the Three, maybe you read The Gunslinger, didn't like it, and you're like, I don't think this is for me. What would you say to those people that are here now? Should they go ahead and just watch this video and see if they, get spoiled, or you say, shut it off now, go buy the book and read it? Maza.
I think they should just stick around, because I feel like even though we're gonna give spoilers, I feel like we're gonna give those vague spoilers, or not really vague, but like we might hit on big ones, but it's gonna like pique their interest. Like I, for one, like would look at reviews, and I would look at the spoiler reviews, and like they say stuff, and I'm like, well, wait, how did he do that? Why did they do that? And then it piques your interest, and you're like, I want to go pick that up. So if you stay and see the spoiler and hear the spoilers, I feel like you'll be like more wanting to read the book. Just because I always tell people that the first book, just get through the first book, and then it'll make a lot more sense. And then the second book is like character work, we get introduced to the characters, and the third book is where the story, in my opinion, really finally takes off.
Okay. Summer?
So I like going into books blind, and so I wouldn't watch it until after I read it, but because I think all of us are going to want to really get, down and dirty with the spoilers.
I'm with Summer. I would go read it first, because I also had no idea, especially after reading The Gunslinger. I was just left after The Gunslinger, like, where is this going? What is this really gonna be about? And it was just so satisfying reading this book, figuring out, okay, this is cool, So I want other people to have that experience.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with the two of you. I like to go into things blind, and I'm enjoying the journey of reading this one. So don't watch the spoiler portion. Go read the book and give it a shot. And I think what Jeff told us before we started was perfect. Is just get through the first book, and it'll make sense. So. And
even the first book for me is so much better now, having read the second one. I get it. I get what you were saying.
Yeah, I think no. I'm just an anti-spoiler guy. Anyway, for anything, I think you should always try to like come at things fresh and let the vision of the creator kind of roll out. People who like read the last page of a book, I'm like, what? Why? How? Why? I don't get that. yeah, I'll let my advice stand. Some people really love the first book anyway, but I say, regardless of what you think the first book, if you think it's promising, if you don't like it, read it through the second book. If you're not in by the end of the second book, fine, give up on the series. It's probably not for you, and maybe get some mental help at that point. But the second book is really where it takes off like rocket fuel.
No, Jeff, me and David have this joke where like we're always like, no, you have to wait till the sixth book, the last page of the book, the last sentence, and then it'll get good.
Just wait till season 3 of XYZ show. Yeah, when people say that to me, I'm like, that's a lot of episodes.
Well, David, thanks for joining. I'm so glad that we talked you into. If you were already planning to start it, then maybe we didn't talk you into it, but I think you'll enjoy it. I just don't let Gunslinger bring you down. So I agree with most of you. Sorry, Mazza. I think that if you are watching right now and you intend on reading this book, go ahead and log off, go buy it, read it. Raul will wait.
Okay, he's done.
Okay, we can start now. All right. So, spoiler warning. Can't say we didn't warn you. So, I'm kind of had an idea to do this in the same way the book, in the same structure as the book. We're going to go through and talk about each door, and starting with door number 1. But before we go there, of course, there are some things that happen before he finds the first door. So, I could not believe how quickly this book just jumped into it. I mean, you start in it and you're like, it's kind of like you're going for a walk and then boom, you nearly get hit by a car. So, talking about your just initial reading the first, couple of chapters before he even finds the first door, what were your thoughts? We're going to kind of go in a different order. I'm going to start with Jeff.
Yeah, I'm very interested in everybody else's thoughts, but one of my favorite things about this book, and I love this in general, but in the Gunslinger, we set him up as just such a keen killer, and nothing can bring him down. Almost infallible, like he can take out a whole town. He's not worried by the slow muties under the mountain. Like he is just stone cold killer, so skilled, so trained by court, just like a Jedi, basically, just invincible. And within first pages of the book, that ends. Like he's brought down, he's brought low, and we don't even realize yet how low it's going to get. But the tools of his trade are gone. His fingers are gone. His bullets are wet and are gone. And I love scarcity in a book too. I love when things are finite and you're like, oh boy, I've only got X amount of left. I gotta scrimp. I gotta save. I gotta look for alternatives. And so those two things right out of the gate in this book, like I'm in. It got me salivating for more. Our invincible hero isn't invincible anymore, and he's got very limited resources that are running out.
Yeah. Mazza?
Yeah, I just saw knitting books comment the lobstrosities. As soon as I heard that word, I just picture like this big old human like with crab-like hands and like I don't know, it was so cool. Like it was high stakes from the start. Like I felt like one of those books where you like kind of like this is gonna be horrible, but I'm bringing up like a Fortnite reference where you just get dropped in that little island and all of a sudden you have to fight for survival, and it's just like from the start I was like, whoa, this guy. And then also I think this is a humongous spoiler, but like his hand just goes out of the whole picture, and I was just like, wait, he's a freaking gunslinger. How did he just take away his hand in the second book? I was just like, okay, I'm here for this. I feel like that's the point when the series where I was like, okay, I feel like I'm gonna enjoy this, just because I love when an author doesn't care. I mean, he cares for his characters, but not even his main character is saved, which is awesome.
Summer?
Yeah, when his fingers were gone, I just thought, and how it happened, it was like that. And I was like, no, wait, he must be mistaken. There must be a way for him to get them back. How is this all going to work? And yeah, the lobstrosities were something else for sure. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. And I loved the little forward in the book. What is it called? On being 19 and a few other things, the introduction. Oh, yeah. I love that. Loved it.
Yeah, because we talked about last time. We'll come back to you, Stephen Brandon. I'm so sorry. We talked about last time about 19 being an important number, and so when I read that, I was like, "Oh, it is. It wasn't just that one thing. There's more to it than that." So that was really cool. So, Stephen Brandy, this is your first, like myself, first experience with the drawing of the three. Having read The Gunslinger, were you expecting? Was it like whiplash for you when you first read what happened at the very beginning of this book? Because for me, I was like, was that a dream? What just happened?
Well, I don't know. I did read The Gunslinger twice because I was trying to give it another fair chance, and I wasn't surprised because I knew Stephen King was going to take these big chances, even though I had no idea where this was going and what this story was even going to be about. But he did kill a whole entire town full of people, so I know that there's big things going to happen. So I wasn't like super. It was good, but I like that no one's safe, like Maza said. You know.
So it starts really fast. Like you all said, it's really action packed, and I was shocked when he was starting to be maimed in the first few pages, or it wasn't very long. But I thought there was gonna be magic or something's gonna bring his hand back. But I did like that the Gunslinger, he was almost like had a cheat code, and then the cheat code was gone, and he had a limited amount of life and resources. So that made it a lot more interesting because in the first book, it felt like he was almost invincible, and all of a sudden he wasn't. So that was a nice little touch.
It's funny that almost all of you brought up the fact that he went from being almost invincible in the first book to quite literally the very beginning of this being dropped down quite a few pegs. And I wondered when I was reading that if there was a lot of pushback after The Gunslinger, that people were like, we don't want a hero that can do everything, and that he did that on purpose. It's like, okay, I have to find a way to bring Roland down a little bit, that he actually needs people to help him get to the Dark Tower. So I really had whiplash. I had to go back and reread it because I was like, is this still part of the dream that he was having? Because, it quite literally starts with him falling asleep on the beach. And I was like, I don't think I read that right. So this can't be happening, right? He's going to wake up and his hand is there. So I liked it because it really made me second guess where the story was going to go, because I had expectations. I was pretty sure it was going to be better, but I didn't think it was going to be that much better that quickly. So it was very, and then I kept thinking, is it good? Now my Jeff lost his phone. I was wondering if the bar was going to remain high, because sometimes when you start like that, it's very easy for your expectations to go down, or your expectations to be high in the beginning of a book. But he really maintained the pacing was good. Everything was really good throughout the book. So I thought that was a solid start. And probably one of the things that Stephen King is really good at is the beginnings of his books, not so much as endings. But we'll talk about the ending when we get further on in the video.
Do you guys have like the illustrated editions, or the ones that have the pictures within the book?
My Kindle version had some pictures.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like my Plume editions, they all have like pictures within the, like, I don't know how many pages, and then there's the picture. Like, I really enjoy that. It's maybe because I like picture books. But
was there a picture of the lobstrosities in there?
Let me look.
I want to know.
It's just a hand though.
Oh
wow.
Yeah,
I didn't picture them like that.
Because
my pictures were
better, like, yeah.
Okay, so now, the Gunslinger is very much in a bad way, and he comes upon the first door, the prisoner, and he opens it up, and what does he see? I'll start with Summer.
Well, I have to say, I absolutely loved that. Eddie is my favorite character. I just love Eddie so much. And so the idea that you can actually take over, you can see through someone's eyes and not take over, but then you can also take over somebody else. And also this person, not understanding that this person all of his issues, you know, and yeah, I love that. I love I don't know how far to go with it, but I love the flight attendant who actually saw his eyes change. And yeah, the whole thing with hiding the drugs and how they managed to do all that. I mean, I absolutely loved it.
I'm with
So-
Summer. I was just like, oh man, this is gonna be fun. Okay, we can be in people's minds. We can take over. We can. I mean, I was just like all excited about it.
Yeah, it was definitely. So what I had told Brandy about this while we were reading, I was like, it was so neat how you experience what's happening on the other side of the door with Roland. So at first he doesn't know where he's at, and he's describing it. I'm like, where is this? Like some spaceship? What is going on here? And then you figure out it's an airplane, and I felt really stupid.
I know. I love seeing or learning Roland learns what things are in through this other door. It's just the way he describes things, and the tutor fish, or it's just it's so funny, so good.
Wasn't it kind of nerve-wracking because like he's in a like we figure out that he's on a plane. You know, he has like this whole like it was like kind of like a little thing of cocaine and stuff, and it's like, how is he gonna get rid of all this stuff? Like I was thinking, like, if I was in that situation, I would never be, but I'm just thinking like that'd be so nerve-wracking. You're on top like of this big old thing in the air. How are you gonna be able to escape from there? Like there was no escape route for him. Like I don't know, I just felt, especially because of all like the stuff that we have connected with like planes and stuff. So I was just like, oh man, like what the heck is gonna happen? Because I think when he wrote this, none of the stuff that we know could happen with planes had happened yet. So I think Stephen King was kind of like, oh, okay, kind of like playing with it a little bit. But once he got rid of the drugs, I was just like, that was like, it never crossed my mind that he would do it that way. Like it was surprising, even towards like the whole end of that scene.
Jeff?
Yeah, I love the disorientation that you new folks had coming into Eddie's world and seeing through his eyes, because of course, having read it as many times as Summer and Maz and I have, I knew it was a plane, so that disorientation wasn't there anymore. But I love seeing that through your eyes. I do love how we start establishing the rules about how much Roland can come forward. Can he take stuff back? Can he come all the way through? Like this whole, and we learn there are kind of different modes to how the door works. And that Roland kind of intuits it, like he just kind of by gut feel, kind of, Court didn't teach him this. It was just, he's figuring it out as he goes along, but he gets these feelings sometimes that he thinks he can do this. He's pretty sure. And I do love like all the side characters in this, the pilots and the police officers, and later on we get to Balazar and his goon squad, like just enough detail here and there to give them a little backstory, to flesh them out. I thought that was great. And Eddie's sense of humor, just in Tudorfish Popkins, and Roland freaking out about how much people are wasting paper, and just details like that really just make this section perfect.
Jeff, have you seen the Book of Eli?
No, I haven't. Do I need to go watch it?
Yeah, I think so. Just because when I saw the Book of Eli, I think it was a better representation of the Dark Tower, even though they're not connected in any way, shape, or form. Like when you see the Book of Eli and as you're reading the Dark Tower, I feel like you get a sense of like a little bit more of how maybe the world is, because in that movie too, like the paper for them is like valuable. Like they don't waste paper, and they, instead of money, they trade, like, for example, he gave him a blanket and some gloves, and I was just like, oh, okay, so this is how it's gonna go down. And I feel like that's how it would be in those times where like everything just went to crap basically, and we have to survive by trading instead of like actually using paper money, because again, paper is so valuable.
Yeah, I'm on it. I'll watch it.
Nice.
I do.
So
it was
much.
funny though. I don't know if you guys or anybody watched Lost or fans of Lost, but when Lost was coming out, Stephen King was a big Lost fan, and I even think he started writing a column for Entertainment Weekly about Lost. And He just, and this scene now, after having watched Lost, reminds me a lot of Charlie hiding his drugs in the toilet when he was flying on Flight 815. And it just, I love those connections back and forth. Obviously, this was written before Lost. The writers of Lost were probably influenced a little bit by Stephen King, but that was the image I got in my head this time of Charlie trying to get rid of his heroin in the bathroom.
Yeah, and just that whole feeling you get when they're like, you can hear them, it's almost like you're there and you're watching it, banging on the door, come out, come out. And I just felt like my hands were sweating and I was like, oh my gosh, is he gonna be able to take the drugs away? And it's just so good.
Yeah,
I love
Stephen King is great about making you feel what the characters are feeling.
Mm-hmm. I love the whole thing with the food, about Roland experiencing food in Eddie's world.
Mhm.
And another thing, on page 118 in my edition, he talks about how, why would anybody ever do cocaine or any other drug when you have sugar?
Yeah,
I loved
saw
that.
that.
Yeah, I loved that.
I liked
Not
how
quite
he
sure
said
if he's eating dog or not, when he's eating the hot
Oh
dog.
yeah,
Oh,
But I'll eat it anyway.
I liked how so you talked about the sugar. That was when he was drinking the Coca-Cola for the first time, and he says, "I wonder if he's thinking the stuff that the white powder in the packets, or that Eddie is snorting, is the same thing as what is in the Coca-Cola." I was like, maybe Stephen King knew something.
I think they didn't introduce him to coffee because you can imagine. I know coffee is like the biggest drug in the world, so it's like if you were like, I would want to see that though, like a rolling on coffee and a coffee certain rush. It'd be like, oof.
It was definitely fun watching him discover, or reading as he discovered things from, I guess would be our world, just laughing at his take on it all. And
Yeah.
just, I mean, it was good. It was good. It was, I don't know, you just, and even those parts where Eddie teaches him lingo of some sort, like, and he says, that's cool, it's like, you could just picture him saying cool.
Something I didn't realize the first time I read this was that Roland kept Eddie clean.
Mm-hmm.
Without Roland, if Roland would have said yes, and Roland took great risks keeping him there with his body, at certain points. So, but yeah, I didn't notice that the first time through.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Eddie, though, you do see, in terms of character introductions, you get, okay, he's a junkie and he's got this, complicated relationship with his brother. But underneath it all, you see how clever he is and how quick he is to kind of outsmart the police. And even though he's scared, he can turn on the charm. And then Roland even talks about his steel, like he sees this like undercurrent of steel under Eddie that's been kind of tamped down by the drugs and tamped down by the kind of mind games that Henry and his mom played with him. But you start to see these strengths in Eddie come out, even though he's not such a great character. He's running drugs and he's a druggie and working for the mafia and all that.
Did you guys get like the whole sense of awe when you find out like H store was named why it was named like that? Like it was like, oh, that makes sense. Like because at first when you first hear like you read the name of the door, you're kind of like the prisoner. But then after you're like, oh, okay, I see why. I don't know. I got that feeling every time I read it. I was like, oh, even with each door, I would be like, oh, okay, clever.
There was a part in the very beginning where Eddie is thinking about how somebody had told him once he started drugs, he would have a monkey on his back. And that is literally what the card for the prisoner had, was a monkey, or I think it was a monkey, a gorilla or something on the back of a person. So you could see why he is the prisoner.
Yeah.
But so there's so much happened in this part, Act 1, if you will, of this book where Roland meets Eddie. So much more happens in this one than in the other doors. So let's talk. We talked a little bit about the police and his scene with the police. Let's talk about the whole scene where he goes to give the drugs to the I can't remember the guy's name. Is it Balazar?
Yeah.
Yeah. There, so much happens there too. I mean, this is when Roland figures out he can actually enter into Eddie's world. And so they work together in their own bodies. So what did you guys think of that? Steve, you didn't talk much in the last part, so let's hear what your thoughts are about this.
Well, I have a question for people who know writing better than I do, because I don't pretend to know. But I'm not sure what it is about Stephen King and his action. I'm not sure how he does it, but it's different than most other authors. I'm not sure if there's something he does differently with action scenes, because it has a different feel to it. I'm not sure if any of you who are more experienced know the
Good or bad feel, Steve?
In a good way. A good way.
A good one.
Very smooth. It's just felt. It didn't over-explain what was happening, but you knew exactly what was happening. And I'm not sure how he does it, but
kind of like if you're seeing a trailer for a movie.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and I don't even know if I want to know, honestly. Like, it's, sometimes you just want to enjoy the recipe and not know what the chef did to prepare it. But it's not straightforward, that's for sure. Like, he's not just describing the action. He's getting in the characters' heads. He's talking about, something they noticed, something they saw, a memory from 2 years ago. Like, he does this, like, weaving in and out of their heads, going to different points of view. And it is so cinematic. Like, in that scene, you can see the chipped fake wood paneling flying with the bullets. It's just, he's a master.
But I thought it was so comical. Was like they're doing this whole shootout scene, but he's naked, and I was just like, I couldn't even do a shootout with my clothes on. This guy's over here like full on nude. It's just like, I don't know, like it was so many thoughts going to my head. Like, this guy's over here nude, and he's over here running around, jumping around, and just like, you do you? Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Steve, did you enjoy the action? I'm guessing you enjoyed the action of these scenes here.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and like Mazza said, he's in his underwear, and there's all these things happening, but it stays focused on what's happening. But there's all these different things going on, but you focus in on the. I said, that's the first time I've read an action scene, I think, that he's written, other than in the Gunslinger, but it just had a different feel to it than other scenes I've written. So I'm not sure if there was a way he does it, but it just seemed very, very flawless. I'm not sure how it happens, but that's what stood out to me is just his writing and how great he is at writing action.
That's right. This is like what you're starting off for Stephen King, huh, Steve?
Mm-hmm.
This is like your starting point. Okay, yeah. A book that I would recommend for you, like if you love action scenes and just like chaos in general, in my opinion, I think Needful Things does a great job as well. Like knowing like the whole chaos and like the whole action scenes. That's a book where I think he also like did a fantastic job of making you feel like it's like a little trailer movie, like everything. And especially because in that book you'll get to see everyone's point of view, and it's just chaos from like the beginning of the book kind of to the very end. Like the very end is just like a big old explosion of chaos, and it's phenomenal how he can like keep track, like you're saying, like he can keep track of like everything he's putting together. Like Jeff was saying, he's weaving this whole thing for an author to keep track of all the things he's mentioned to make sure he doesn't have any plot holes in what he said is just a tremendous work, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
He definitely trusts the reader to fill in the blanks for him. And I think that's the reason why his horror is so good. Like you're saying, Jeff, he kind of weaves in and out of the character's head. So you're experiencing their fear, not just, oh, I'm showing you something that's scary. You know why it's scary. The characters are, it was one of those, when I was a teenager and I read it for the first time, it was terrifying because I really related with the kids. And so when they were scared of something like a giant bird, which as an adult now, I'd be like, okay, that's not real. But for Michael, it was terrifying. It was, one of his biggest fears. But Stephen King does that so well because he makes you feel what the characters are feeling. So it's not just, this is, a generalized scary thing like a ghost where we all kind of share that fear. This is a fear that's specific for a character, and it's scary because you're in that character's head. Mm-hmm. And in this book, the confusion that Roland feels, you feel that as you're entering into this world. And that was, to me, already spoke volumes about how much I was going to enjoy this. I've always been a Stephen King fan, maybe not a constant reader, but I can't say there's very many of his books that I disliked. But yes, this action scene. And I also thought that Roland kind of went into this thinking he knew he had limitations because of his fingers, but he also kind of didn't have that same level, or he didn't have the fear, right? He kind of was like, I'm going to do this. And then he realized really quickly, okay, maybe I need help. And Eddie's the one that steps in and helps him. So, we say that Roland really played a big part in Eddie's life. He kept him clean, but not just in this chapter, Eddie kind of steps up and helps him as well. And so there's kind of a mutual, I don't know, like a mutual helping.
Like if you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back.
Yeah.
Symbiotic relationship.
Yes. But it's
it's
organic, right? It's not, okay, you did that, I'm going to do this. It was kind of like, Eddie didn't do it because Roland kept him clean. He didn't save him because of that. He saved him because it was his instinct to do it. And because the enemy of my friend is my enemy kind of thing.
Well,
But
yeah,
I thought this was a perfect scene to show that what was eventually going to be the bond between these two characters.
Yeah, I feel like they needed each other to survive. And through the whole shootout, I was so worried for Eddie because I thought, is he going to be in denial of what has happened to his brother? How is that going to affect him? Because this is the first time I feel like Eddie has really stepped up and done something. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think another reason why the action scene was so good is because it was constructed and built well before this, and so the action scene is probably maybe a couple pages, and that's the payoff. But he built it so well, like all these details about Eddie having a nickname for Old Double Ugly and Chimmy Dreddo, and the guys off in the other room playing Trivial Pursuit with Henry, and every answer was Johnny Cash. And
until it needed to be Johnny Cash, and then it wasn't Johnny Cash.
Will Brenner. and then like even the boss and constructing his house of cards, and Chimmy being in awe of this, like it wasn't just coming in and going, okay, and then Roland shot goon number 1 and goon number 2 and goon. There was a little life to all of these people, and some stakes as to why they'd be dangerous if they weren't just like when you watch a movie, you don't have time to do this, so you just see them as goon number 1, goon number 2, and they go down like a deck of cards, and it's no big deal. It's stormtroopers on the Death Star. But Stephen King sets this up and he constructs it well ahead. So when he lights the fuse and all this goes off, we're so in, and we see this happening. And maybe that's part of some of the smoothness that Steve picked up on too, that it's not just in the guy to his left, it was in, Old Double Ugly, George Biondi,
That's so true. Because even the smallest character gets a little bit of life like infused into him. Like it's not like there's a lot of side characters, but I feel like each of them you kind of like get to see them, even if it's for a millisecond, you get to see within them, and like it's not just like you said, because it does get pretty annoying when like they say, oh, I killed bodyguard number 1, bodyguard number 2, and then I got to the main target, and it's like, bruh.
Yeah.
So there's a line right before the shootout happens when Andolini, I think this is when he sees Roland come out of I can't remember what happened right before this, but I tagged it because I thought it was a really interesting line. But so Andolini he says, he's looking, I didn't know what had happened. Part of him was sure he had gone crazy. Part was sure Eddie had doped him or gassed him or something like that. Part believed that the vengeful god of his childhood had finally tired of his evils and had plucked him away from the world he knew and set him down in this weird purgatory. And so we had talked in Gunslinger about whether or not Gunslinger's world was a purgatory. And so we see here that it's when he's looked through, that's what it was. He looked through the door and he's like, what the hell is that? and he describes it as a purgatory. And so I thought that was interesting. But that's right before Roland comes through the door and the shootout starts. That just was, I had made a note of that. I made notes of lots of cool references in here that kind of brought me back to our discussions in the Gunslinger. So I really enjoyed reading this one.
I think there's another line in that right close to that where the Gunslinger shoots at the same time that Andolini shoots, and like the bullet explodes in his gun, and the Gunslinger is talking about it after. He's like, I think I've only seen that happen like twice before. So it's like, this is 1 in a trillion shot. The Gunslingers seen it happen like twice before. It happens. You shoot down the barrel of the other guy's gun.
It's like no biggie. I do that sometimes. Do you guys, Jeff and Summer and Stacy, and Steve, you guys will probably get to see this a lot too with like Stephen King books. Do you guys notice that he actually brings up heaven and hell a lot? Like especially heaven, like he's always like in the middle. Like in some books he says that there's a heaven, and then in other books he's like, nah, there's no such thing as heaven, and like there is something like a big like identity out there like protecting us, and like I don't know, I've always like found it so fascinating that he's like in the middle. Like I wonder if him as a person, like him as a person, I guess, like human being, is in the middle too. Like he's in the fence about believing in heaven and not believing, so it portrays in his writing. Or maybe he just does it because he doesn't want to lean one way or the other, just because he doesn't want to hurt feelings, kind of. But I feel like Stephen King is not the type of person to care if he's going to hurt someone's feelings. So like if that's just him as a person being stuck in the middle, believing or not.
Well, I kind of feel like that's a human experience for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a long period of time. If you're talking about when he started writing to now, I mean, he's gone through a whole lifetime of experiences. So.
Yeah, that's very true.
I want to talk about lobstrosities.
The what?
Lobstrosities, and do you think they taste like lobster?
So that leads us to the shuffle right before door 2. Let's talk about
a question about the shuffle, because you said you listened to it on audiobook.
Mhm.
I listened to it on audiobook, but I was also reading. So when I was reading, the audiobook actually shuffled and read them out of order from what they were in the book. Now, is that something you guys picked up on that was meant to happen? Or I just as somebody who's read through the book, he read it like in different pieces in the audiobook. I think. I don't know. I was really confused at that part. But I felt like it was a big haze of him being of Roland being sick and feverish, like a fever dream situation, and Eddie coming down off the smack, So I don't know if he meant to like, or maybe my Kindle copy was weird. I don't know.
I don't know if we trust your bootleg Kindle copies anymore.
They're not bootleg.
Brandy's out on the dark web getting like, copies of Gunslinger.
I don't know where it came.
Well, this one was rewritten as well. I noticed in the copyright, there's 2 copyright dates. There's 1987 and then 2003. So I don't know if he made edits and you're reading an old version of it again.
I'll have to look.
Oh, that's right, because you actually read the first Gunslinger, huh, Randy? You didn't read the revised edition.
Yeah, it was different, I think.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a good one. That's a good one, because I feel like in the revised one, like I read the revised one too, and it kind of takes a little bit of, I don't want to say the life, but like when you it's like comparing it to like a homemade muffin and then like a muffin that you already like bought at the store. Like I don't know, that's how I saw it. Like the homemade muffin, like it felt a little bit better than the one that you buy at Walmart, kind of. I don't know. That's my take on it.
Great analogy.
So circling back to what Summer said, in the shuffle we have Eddie now taking care of Roland. Literally, he's feeding him lobstrosities. And I thought that was cool because it was the lobstrosity. And even Roland says, I wonder if that was the one that I had eaten in my fingers. He's eating the thing that may have eaten him.
And then you don't know if it's poisonous.
Well, it's either that or death, starvation, right?
Yeah, there's nothing else. That's why I was surprised when Roland said, "We're eating that," and I'm like, "Of course you are. What else are you going to eat?"
I vote for it since Stephen King's from Maine. I'm originally from Maine. I'm gonna go. It just tastes like giant lobster. That's my vote.
I don't know. I think they'd be a little more sour. Like they'd have a tang to them.
So since
Little slight flavor of andalini.
they were like human, but they were also at the same time a lobster, do you think it's cannibalism or no?
Nah.
Stays like, no.
Summer's like, no.
I think the tang is nothing some butter wouldn't cover up.
There you go.
So here we have Roland getting better with the antibiotics, and so they're moving on to the next door. I can't remember if there's anything in the shuffle that was really. I don't have any tabs for here. Do you guys have anything you want to talk about before we move on to the next door?
Let me see. What page is it? I mean, I have a page tabbed here, but I wanted to talk about Ka.
Okay.
I'm not sure where it is. So,
Ka. Say it twice then, Steve.
yeah.
Caca.
Oh, I just keep forgetting all these funny things.
Yeah. Because there was some inside Dark Tower jokes last time we met, and I was confused. So it was nice to see. Nice to find out what Ka meant. So it was on page one.
Go ahead and read it.
Well, it starts with, "What's Ka?" Eddie's voice was translucent. I never heard of it except if you say it twice, you come out with the baby word for shit. But that's just yeah. Let me see. Let me find. I was just looking at it. Sorry. It's basically what's happened, what's going to happen, and what's happening now. In a nutshell, I think.
I do love how Eddie kind of calls him out on it because, like, a lot of people, you can say, "Well, this is my fate," or "This is what it was meant to be," and sometimes you buy into that. You're like, "Yes, you were destined to be this, and you're absolutely right. You're on the right path." And then Eddie just kind of says, "Well, that's just what you say when you want it to be what you want it to be," and he kind of calls it bullshit. So.
Is that kind of why you like Eddie so much, Summer? Just because he's like, I feel like it'd be like us, like, what the heck are you talking about, bro? It's just like, it doesn't mean it's gonna happen just because you say it's Ka. Like, I feel like that's how Eddie would be like, okay, whatever it's called. Like as Steve was saying, it's like probably just a little baby shit or something. Like, what are you talking about?
I forgot, Stacey, are we swearing on your channel?
I don't care. It doesn't bother me.
They're gonna
So
get
I
you.
don't have. If there are any young people watching this, you should ask your parents for permission because you shouldn't be watching this in the first place.
Just pretend we said caca.
So we talked about how one of the things about Eddie is he's always kind of been needed, right? His brother has always needed him. And so he's always been in a position of being needed. And now here he is with Roland, and he very quickly fills that position for Roland. And there is a scene here where Roland says to Eddie, he says, there are people who need people to need them. The reason you don't understand is because you're not one of these people. But I didn't think that was true. What did you guys? So he says, you'd use me. Oh no, I'm sorry. He says this. Eddie is saying this to the gunslinger. Sorry, I'm misreading. So Eddie is explaining to the gunslinger that there are people that need people to need them, and that is exactly who Eddie is. And then he says, you don't understand this because you're not one of those people. You'd use me and then toss me away like a paper bag if that's what it came down to. And Mazu, you're talking about how Eddie just kind of tells the gunslinger, this is how it is. And this is one of those times he's like, look, you don't need people. But that's not true because the gunslinger is essentially finding these people and bringing them back because he does need them. He just doesn't really understand why he needs them yet.
Well, he needs them, but he doesn't need them to need him.
Oh, that's true. Yes. Okay.
That's what Eddie's saying. Like you don't want to care for people. You don't want to take care of people because they need you. You need people. You need, just like a carpenter needs a hammer. Like you need tools, but he doesn't need that in reciprocation.
But I like the progress in the book. How we find out that Eddie in the end might need a Roland a little bit more than he thinks, just because I don't know what do you think, Jeff? Like, do you think at this point Stephen King had already experienced like his drug abuse kind of thing, or not yet? I felt like
Heavily.
he knew what Eddie felt because of that freaking monkey on his back, and I just it was so interesting to see when Eddie needed that. Like you could feel that he actually needed it. It wasn't just like, oh, I do this sometimes and I kind of need to have some right now. It was just like that freaking monkey, and then knowing King's like past, I was like, I wonder if that was connecting and he was portraying it in his story, which is kind of like a cry for help.
He was definitely deep into it now, and he's given interviews where he talks about that. And it's a theme that continues all the way through. We did Dr. Sleep a couple months ago, which is a more recent book, and the main characters are going to AA and things like that. So I think he was definitely much earlier on in his journey through that, but no doubt his experience with Eddie and needing the withdrawals and all that, I'm sure he's writing some things out from inside him.
I do think at some point that the Roland needing Eddie to stay sober was at first very selfish, right? Because he needed him to be sober. But I think that changed towards the end. That he knew that it was better for him. Like there are some times where he's like, I just know that you would be better off without this. Because he'd seen, with the devil weed, what it does to people. So it wasn't just I need you to be sober kind of thing. It was also, maybe he didn't really want to care about Eddie, but he did because it was important for him to stay sober for Eddie's sake. At some point that kind of changed. And I think it might be after the second door when he realizes what Eddie starts having feelings for said person beyond the second door. So are we ready to get on with that? Let's talk about door number 2. And we are already in an hour. It's like an hour took us just to get through Eddie. We could have a part 2 of it.
And Odetta is way more fascinating, even though Eddie's my favorite.
So let's talk about Odetta. So let's start with Brandy. Brandy, what did you think of Odetta?
I think at some point I did text Stacy with big wide emoji eyes like Detta. Holy crap, she's exhausting. But she was meant to be exhausting, but she exhausted me. I was just like, man, this chick. And then my other, which isn't necessarily bad. I mean, I like an annoying character. It was very believable.
You're married to me, so. Sorry.
But it was entertaining, and you still with her even get that feeling of like, oh my gosh, it's making me nervous, and like she's driving me nuts. Which any kind of response that I can, or any kind of feeling that a book elicits for me is like, whether it's funny or nervousness or anything. So I liked that she was that way. It's not a complaint. But also the one complaint I do have is I feel like Eddie kind of fell in love with Odetta too fast. That was really fast. Did it feel fast for you guys?
Yes.
I was just like, really
Yes.
already? I love her.
Right.
I couldn't get on board because I was just learning about Odetta myself, and he's already in love with her. So I was like, we don't know her yet.
Odetta for like 5 minutes.
I'm like, we got to get to know her, Eddie. We don't know her yet.
Well, let's be honest, there weren't a whole lot of other women on the beach with him, so
Yeah.
his options were
Yeah.
a little limited.
Yeah. And how is Eddie in his early 20s?
He was young. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd say he was
Yeah,
young.
he was
like,
maybe 24
had a-
or something. I felt
yeah,
like
he
he
had
was
an
really young.
early 20s kind of response to most things too. So
Yeah.
And Odetta kind of calls him, like, when she kind of wants to put some distance, she talks about how he's a young man and talks about their age difference, and he kind of like stings him a little bit, like, hey, come on.
She's definitely a challenge for him.
Yeah. Literally. Steve, what did you think of these two women?
I thought she was hilarious. I loved it. It was a nice little. The humor was a nice little break between all the other action and everything going on, and I did like the play on words. I'm sure we'll get to that later, but That was really clever.
Which
I'm
play
not
on
sure-
words?
The drawing of the three.
Oh, yeah.
Are you talking about the third door?
That yeah, basically. Yeah.
Or do you mean that, you know, he already got his 3 because Odetta is 2?
Yeah, because I was with the third door I was expecting something else to happen, so I thought it was pretty neat that it wasn't quite what we were expecting.
Yeah, quite. That was another part where I had to go back and reread. I was like, wait, did he say he's not bringing anybody from this one? But we'll get there, and I don't want to jump too far ahead.
But I think just really quickly, I think the romance was a little fast, but in a way it made sense because he had just lost his brother, and it kind of felt like he was going through some emotional ups and downs, and maybe that's kind of why it made sense to me, is he was recovering still from that and from the whole experience. But
And she was again another person that needed him, right? Because she was now experiencing something he had gone through, and he's the only one who has gone through what she has gone through.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I also get a sense that Odetta is. Oh, go ahead, Summer.
Summer, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love that she's from the 1950s, that she's from another time. And then he gave her a handicap, and what a handicap he gives her. And yeah, I feel like the whole thing with Eddie, it was fast, but Odetta seemed like she was such of a beautiful woman and so graceful and sweet. And I think anybody probably could have fell in love with her really easy. I'm not sure if Detta would have survived the whole thing with when she started screaming in the middle of the night. I think I might have accidentally killed her.
Right?
I hope
Yeah, Summer, you said something I was just going to say. I think Odetta is not only just physically beautiful, but also I think there's like this spirit of goodness inside her, that she's this rich woman who could just live in New York in her penthouse, but yet she goes because she's so passionate about the civil rights movement and about, I think Eddie couldn't help but falling in love with Odetta. Although you're right, the Detta part would have been tough to handle. Everybody's got a couple sides to them. I suppose I could go watch TV in the den when Detta's around.
Yeah.
So the split personality trope is not new for fiction, right? And we often know that split personalities come from some kind of triggering event. What in here, I struggle to know which event actually triggered her. Did you guys pick up on what it was? I missed it. I couldn't figure out if it was when she lost her legs or if it was earlier when she bumped her head as a child.
I got that it was earlier when she had the brick thrown at her head.
Oh, for the brick, yeah. When she was in a coma, right?
Yeah, I can't remember why I feel that way because there's so much in the book.
There was something in the book when she got hit with the brick. I forget. There was something in there that kind of.
That was huge. That was,
yeah.
And maybe it's because reading it the second time, but yeah, that Jack Mort. I mean, that was huge that it went full circle, and she's 5 years old and she's walking, and because we know his character, Roland has been inside of him, and then to see him do that to Odetta when we already know Odetta and the struggle she has because of that. Yeah, that was like
mind blowing. Yeah.
Yeah,
well, he quite literally made her the person that she is now, more than once.
Twice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cop.
Because it was twice.
And here's the thing, with reading it the second time, Steve, I'm not sure if I caught that the first time I read it, but reading it a second time, because I knew so much and it was just flowing. I mean, I read it, I think, in 3 or 4 days. I just was like, and it was the first of the month, so it's been a couple weeks, but I don't know, all these little things stood out the second time that I missed the first time.
Yeah, because going
I
back
think
to
Stacey's question is a good one, because I don't know if I can tell you honestly if it was the brick and Detta started appearing after the brick, or if she didn't fully come forward until the train, that fabled A train. I don't know, honestly.
I don't know why I keep trying to like. I remember him saying something that, or Detta saying that when she was like, when she got hit in the head with the brick, that she found herself when she was in the coma, she found herself in her head and it was all dark and she could see another person in the back of her mind. So I don't know if it's that, and that was the other person lurking, because I feel like Stephen King made it seem like we all have that person in the back of our head, like the evil one, I guess. And that was her just waiting in the shadows, just waiting to come out. And then after the coma and everything happened, that's when she finally was like, "Oh, I'm here." And then that's when the dual personalities started happening.
So
I think the answer to this might be in the scene where she kind of lures white boys into her car and then like beats them up. If she's got her legs, and that has to be before the train.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say no. When she broke that plate, and when she was luring those guys back and beating them up, she had legs. So it had to be the brick.
Yeah. And then I think there was some talk, or Odetta said something, and I don't know exactly, but she was saying that she, after that coma, she would lose chunks of time.
Mm-hmm.
And she never knew why, but we know that it's because Odetta, or because Detta took over.
Hey, Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy.
I just thought there was so much mystery in this section with her trying to figure out how she is the way she is, trying to figure out how she was going to play a part in this group before. And just, like the scenes after they tied her up because she turned into Detta, and those were funny. Yeah.
Can I throw in a detail that? Can I throw in a detail? I don't know if anybody else picked it up. I know, Steve, you were going to go back and read and watch The Shining. But did anybody catch the reference to The Shining in the Stephen King book?
No.
He talks about there was a reference. I forget what it was. It was the hotel, or it was the character. There was something that I read. So
it's when Eddie's looking through the door, and Odetta, when they first are looking through Odetta's eyes, or I guess she's dead at that point because she's shoplifting. And it's too smooth. He said the motion is too smooth, and it turns out because she's in the wheelchair. But he said it's like that scene in The Shining, where the camera is the steady camera's moving through, and then he sees the creepy twins. And I don't know how many people picked that up, but we've got a reference. Eddie has seen a movie based on a Stephen King book inside a Stephen King book.
A door within a door.
Yeah.
Within a door, because we're in Odetta's mind.
I think too there wasn't there a reference to how there's always a reference to how scary clowns can be, or there was some kind of clown reference in this book too. I should have marked it, but there was one little clown reference somewhere.
And typically they seem to be like his top hitter books that yield. I feel like he might add some for other books, but you notice the ones that are like the top seller books, like It, The Shining, and there's more. There's a lot more references. Like right now, I'm reading 11/22/63, and I won't spoil it for you guys, but I was just like, for real, is this really happening? Like, is this happening within the book, even though it happened in real life? I was like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. I told my wife, and she was like confused too, and she was like, I was like, no, this is happening in the book, and she was like, oh, okay.
So at any point during the Detta part of this book, did you guys think that they were going to find a way to pull Detta out as a separate person? Because I kept thinking, they kept referencing that she had a door in her mind. The Gunslinger talks about that. And beyond that door, we know is Detta. So I kept thinking, is he going to cure her by bringing Detta out and then feeding her the lobstrosities?
Well, it's when I remember when I initially read it, my thoughts were always like, well, we just got to get rid of Detta because Odetta is obviously the one we like. But then in my more recent times, I realized that Roland wasn't on board with that. Roland, even though Detta was horrible, he saw how deadly Detta was and how cunning she was, and he kind of liked Detta. So he was like, if I could tame her a little bit, and she's the one I need for my
gunslinger.
She's the tool.
Yeah. So I think the perfect time now is to talk about door 3 because I think it kind of brings the first doors together. So I was going to talk about how it eventually, Odetta, it seems to me by the end of this book, let me put up the banner really quick, just in case people don't know, we're talking about the drawing of the 3, and we're going to talk about the third door, the pusher. And Summer, you brought this up, you brought him up already, that, Roland goes through this door thinking he's about to find the third person to make up his new group of people. And that's not what happens here. So Summer, tell us a little bit more about the character we meet on the other side of this door.
Oh, well, of course, I hate Jack Mort, I do love how when Roland came through to Eddie and Odetta, because it's like they're at their lowest points, and I'm thinking, how could he make it more complicated to go into somebody's body when somebody's shoplifting and somebody's on a plane, with a bunch of drugs strapped to them. But yeah, Jack Mort, to be in his mind was just horrible. I mean, the way he thought about everything, what he thought, what he wanted to do to people, how sneaky he was, and just, I mean, it kind of, I'm so like emotional that it kind of hurt to read, because I would never want to be that type of person. So, yeah.
Once again, you kind of experience the confusion, that Roland feels. Even though this is his third time, he kind of thinks he knows what to expect. But then right away he realizes, who does he see? He sees Jack. Is that what his name was from the first book? Am I getting the
Jake?
Jake.
Oh, Jake.
And so he thinks he's in the Man in Black's body,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so right away you're like, what the?
Yeah.
So what did you guys think of that when he, that whole disorientation that the gunslinger feels? Because now this old feeling is coming back, quite literally tying this to the Gunslinger book. I was not expecting Jake to make a comeback here. I had been told that he makes a comeback somewhere else in the series, so this obviously came as a surprise to me.
Who told you that?
Yeah, who told you?
Somebody who was mean and spoiled some. They didn't give me any specifics. Just were like, that's not the last you'll see of him. And so, but anyway, Brandy and Steve, this being your first time, what did you think about that? And then him chasing him, trying to stop all of this from happening. It was kind of that time travel paradox thing. It's like, if I stop it, then Jake won't come to me, to the way station, and it's going to change everything that happens after. What did you think?
Well,
Steve thought it was like dark. That's what Steve thought.
Yeah. Steve's like, everything's just come full circle. It happens in threes or what?
Me too well.
No, I had to read this particular chunk of the book like 3 times because I was so confused, and it finally came to me, but I didn't know were we in his mind, or was it the Man in Black? We're seeing Jake now. I mean, I just had to read over it a couple times, and then once it became like really clear to me as I kept going, we are in this crazy person's mind. And is he actually in the time that he's dropping the brick on Odetta, or is he just looking into his memories? So it took me a while to figure out that he was in the Mortsopedia. So that's what that meant. He's actually just filing through what his experiences, I guess. I don't know. It was very weird, but very satisfying when I figured out what was going on. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, Jeff was right. It reminded me of Dark, but also
I knew it.
Come on.
But also it took me a while to kind of catch on, and there's all these different loops that could be taking place. But my takeaway from it was how much it's influenced stories that we all love, like Dark, that section, or I don't know later books, but at least that kind of reminded me a little bit of Neuromancer, even though I didn't really care for Neuromancer. You start to realize how much it's influenced other stories that we all love and enjoy now. So.
I think like Summer brought up, wasn't it really creepy to see a person that gets joy out of, like, he doesn't even kill the people, like he just wants to create horrible accidents for them to just like not have a good time in life. Like he wants to make people feel the way he probably feels, like really bad inside and like really like just a really crappy person, crappy life. He wants to give that feeling to someone else so that he can have someone to kind of like, I don't know if you guys, maybe I'm just like this, I always feel bad for bad people, I guess, just because I feel like deep inside no one's born evil. It's like just life hits you hard sometimes, and it's just the way that you chose to be. So I kind of felt bad for the guy that he wanted someone really bad to feel what he felt in life, that he would create mayhem to other people to make them feel the way that he felt, because he never had that person. Like, I feel like if he would have had an Eddie in his life, maybe he would have gone a different direction. But it's just, I don't know, I feel like I'm thinking too much into it. Like, and probably King was just writing it. I'm over here like trying to dissect it and trying to figure out how Jack was, and I was like, but I feel like that's just how I am. I really like dissecting an evil person. Like, for example, I don't know if you guys saw Cruella recently, but they're coming out with a lot of like different. We're seeing why the person, I guess, is evil and what made him become evil, and I just love that, because I know no one is born evil.
Yeah, you brought up about why he does things, and he actually says here what mattered was the thing which pushed change into the flow of lives, and perhaps the destinies that not only of those struck, but of the widening circle around them, like ripples from a stone tossed in a still pond. Yeah. So we talked, about the paradox of the Gunslinger making any changes here, and what that will have, what effects will. But in essence, that's exactly what the pusher does, right? He's trying to change things by pushing. He's pushing change by affecting people's lives. And unfortunately, he decides to do it in a negative way. But that is what, even if that's like his desire to do things so, to change people's lives in such a way, he chooses to do it in a negative way. So that's what makes him truly evil, because there are ways to affect people's lives in a positive way, isn't there? That would also have rippling effects.
So here's a question, though. Is he anti-Ka, or is he serving Ka? So he's trying to change people's destinies, which if everyone has Ka, and Ka has this path for everybody, he's breaking that. Or in this case, he was an agent of Ka, touching Roland's life in many places. Jake, what he did brought Jake to the Gunslinger. What he did brought Detta and Odetta, kind of separated them. Which is it?
Well, I think it's very dangerous to play God, because I think we have no idea what our actions, what ripple effect it could cause, and something we think is right, we can find out years later that it was something that was very wrong.
Well, Jack finds that out, doesn't he? Because what he started with Odetta comes back to eventually end his own life, right? Because a gunslinger wouldn't be in his head if he hadn't been in Odetta's head. I have a
question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, finish. Sorry.
I was just going to say, so those ripples that he caused actually ended up bringing Ka to his own doorstep.
Okay, this is where I was confused, because also you guys talk about things coming for full circle, and I might have brought this up to Steve too. Is the Gunslinger being in Jack's head, Mort's head? Is he Jack Mort? Did that keep him from pushing Kyle, so that the Man in Black actually had to come do the pushing, so that things could still go down? That's what I'm wondering, but I don't know. I was confused about that whole thing. Why didn't he end up pushing him? Why was it the Man in Black that pushed him?
I think maybe because remember, Gunslinger heard that story from Jake, and Jake felt the push, and then he looked up, and the Man in Black was there as like a priest. So I don't know if we know for sure, that's a good question, because maybe because Roland intervened and Jack Mort didn't push Jake, maybe the Man in Black had to come in and do it at another point to cause everything to happen the way it is. Or maybe the Man in Black was there and Jack Mort did the pushing and the Man in Black was the one who stepped forward and acted like a priest.
But we don't know
That's
that.
a really
That
good
wasn't
question.
revealed and I missed it. Okay.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's...
Well, it couldn't have been Jack Mort because we followed Jack Mort until his life ends. So when would he have done it? It had to have been the Man in Black that eventually does it, or it doesn't happen at all. And Maz's got a look on his face like we're gonna find
I'm
out.
just like, I don't want, like, you guys like going blind to your books. That's why I'm just not saying anything.
How's my poker face today? I've been practicing.
It's good, Jeff. Very good.
Thank you.
All three of you should be poker players. You
Yeah.
guys are
Next
doing
time
pretty
I'll
good.
bring my poker face, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Well-
Just hearing, it's so fascinating to hear you guys like having this whole discussion and like knowing what's gonna happen. It's kind of like, oh man, like you guys are in like for. I'll just like it's. I can't. I'll just.
So
Yeah,
I
it's
would
hard.
say,
It was so long ago when I read them that I only remember these little tiny bits of things in the future books. This one I remember more so because it was my favorite. But the rest of them, the Wastelands on, I remember certain things and certain characters, but there's a lot that I'll, be surprised about too, or, that I've forgotten about or didn't catch the first time because these books are crazy. There's so much information. There's so much that goes on.
all right, well, we're already on for an hour and a half, so I'm going to start wrapping things up. Let's talk about how the last door ends. So we kind of see what the purpose of the Gunslinger, Roland going through this door was to... Who wants to start?
He's got to get
Come
some antibiotics because the infection
Well.
is back with a vengeance. So he's got to get to New York one more time.
We
Mhm.
need
For that.
some Aston.
Some Aston.
Aston.
Big time.
Yes, he's fast.
Isn't
I
it so
love
cool?
those kind of things. I just loved it.
Wasn't it cool to see that, like how he would see our medicine, and then when he was buying the bullets, he was like, "I can get this many. I can buy them in bulk," and they were like, "Yeah, you can get as many as you want." I was just like,
Yes.
it's so cool to see that. Like, I don't know, I just like the perspective of someone like coming in new to something, and then just like something that we know happens and that we know it's normal. To see it being not normal for someone, it's so fascinating.
And by the way, that's one of my favorite scenes that always sticks out in the book is the whole like getting the bullets, getting the police
yeah.
officers'
There's the
guns
whole
and
scene,
strapping
yeah.
on their guns, and now he's got guns for Eddie and Odetta. Although I always miss it every time for some reason they don't make it back with him. But he's got the bullets, he's getting the Aston and the Chief Lex, and yeah, I just love this part all coming together. And then there's a really frustrating part where it's like, okay, you got it all. Now get back through the door. Just go back through the door. You can take Mort with you. You can feed him to the lobstrosities if you want to kill him. But no, he goes on this like cross New York chase just to get back to the subway platform.
But I think that's when he realizes, because he knows that was something that happened between Odetta and Detta when she sees herself in the mirror, right? And I think he knows the only way for Odetta to be able to control that part of her is for her to confront it. That she needs to. This is the reason why I wondered if Detta was created by the train, because it was like she had to see that in order to confront her Detta side. So let's talk a little bit about that scene where he forces her to see him kill Jack Mort, so that she can
Fears.
confront that.
I think it was more of like a psychological thing. Like, I gotta confront my fears. Like, that was one of her fears. Like, this guy just made her life miserable, and like that's one of her biggest fears. So, and then I feel like she knows deep inside of her, she knows there's another person with her, and she fears that person. So to finally confront her, it was like a big thing. But I like how he did the whole thing of making them not. They didn't necessarily like fight each other, but it was more of like who's gonna take control, and at the end, no one really wins kind of thing. And it was like kind of like a thing of like, oh, I'm gonna morph these two people and mold like a even better person overall. So it was like both the world best, like the best of both worlds. There we go.
I have a question though. When you first are getting to know Odetta or Detta in her world, in her time, there are little pieces of them in her mind and her thoughts of Roland wouldn't mind or Roland wouldn't approve of this. Like it popped in there a couple times. Okay, so now flash forward to all the way what's going on right now. Does she remember him from? I don't know why is Roland in her mind too?
I have a theory.
Did anyone catch that? I
I
don't.
think those are poker faces. I think.
Oh, okay.
Well, no,
No,
I think there's a bit to her character, in just like Eddie's, his superpower is being clever and knowing how to talk to people and kind of BS his way out of things. I think one of her superpowers is she's very insightful into people, when she's not lying to herself. But I think Odetta, there's even a line there where it says she sees things, or she sees more, or something like that. And I think she's intuitive on a level that might be more than just normal.
Okay.
Yeah, she's still a bit of a mystery to me. I keep thinking about how she was in such a denial that if she was Detta, you couldn't call her Odetta. Like, no, that person doesn't exist. And the whole thing with her truly believing that Eddie and Roland were doing horrible things to her. I mean, these things they were actually doing these things to her mind. She actually thought she couldn't hold down any food because of an allergy. Like I just found her character fascinating, even though I couldn't stand Odetta. I knew we needed her.
Yeah, I agree.
They were doing things with their little bitty white candles.
So then we get, is this Susanna?
Susanna, yeah.
And so that was the drawing of the three then, was not necessarily Eddie, Odetta,
And Roland.
and whatever was behind the third door. It was the three people within Odetta, Detta.
It's Susanna.
Is that okay? Is that where? I don't know if that was my takeaway.
Yeah, because I always thought that it was because my cover has 3 doors in the cover. I was like, oh, there's 3 doors, so there he's gonna draw like he drew kind of like the doors were the cards that they were the I always can't pronounce what they're called, the tarot cards. Like I thought that was what it was. Like the tarot cards became the doors, and that's why it's called the drawing. Because when you're drawing a card, you draw like the Dark Man drew 3 cards, or I don't know how many he drew, and they're coming to life. So that's why it's like the drawing of the 3, because the cards became the doors, and because they got drawn. Like there's like a whole little thing going on in my head when I thought of it. But I think it makes more sense for it to be like he drew 3 people, because in a sense, like it was the 2 people stuck in one person, and then they became Susanna.
Yeah, the math gets a little fishy there, because if you're counting everybody, then he's technically drawn 4: Eddie, Odetta, Detta, and Susanna. And the same thing with like the whole like showing, going back to the train. Like, why did she have to see the train? Because that's where she literally got severed in 2, although she technically got severed in 3 if you count each of her legs. So again, math. It's a good thing he was an English teacher, because math is not his strong.
Well, I didn't take it like the book was about the drawing of 3 people to go on Roland's journey with him. I took it in the end as Eddie helped him. Eddie was like just another character helping him draw these 3. From Odetta, like it was a story about the drawing of the 3, but the 3 wasn't what the 3 that we thought it was. It was the 3 people in Odetta's mind.
Like that?
Yeah.
Maybe he just didn't use 4, Jeff, because he's very like oh man, I just lost my train of thought. Freaking Stephen King is very like he doesn't like the number 13. Like, what is that word when you're very
superstitious?
He's really superstitious, and number 4 in Japan means death, so he didn't want to include number 4. Like, he's a very superstitious person. So Even for some of his stories, like number 13 is super bad, and I'm just like, why is that so bad? Like, I like the number 13.
I was born on Friday the 13th.
See, exactly.
Really?
Like,
Work for summer. So, Steve, you had said something about the third door. You said it wasn't what you had expected. What did you expect coming to the third door?
I expected them to draw another person, a different person, a whole nother person.
A specific person or just a different person in general?
Just a different person.
Oh,
I thought
okay.
it was going to be, is it Jake or Jack?
The kid?
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be the
I thought it was
kid.
going to be him, but I liked that it was not what I expected.
Mhm. So, before we go on to final thoughts, let's talk about your favorite scene of the whole book. Who wants to start? Raise your hand.
Oh,
Steve.
The gun store was my favorite part. That was hilarious.
That was a good part.
Great. Yeah.
it was clever. It was clever him taking the ID or his wallet, like sliding it underneath the thing. Because I was like, how is all this going to work?
What's interesting is that his coming up with all of that was based on Jack Mort's memories and understandings. That he literally, because he doesn't know this world, and he's like, how can I find a way? And so I thought that was interesting that he had to draw on Jack Mort in order to even do that. But it was good. That whole scene was good. I have to agree with Steve. That was a really good one.
And then he hands him the watch when they're like, don't, just put it away and we'll split it later, and because it was worth way more than what he took. So that was really funny.
Yeah, I'm with Steve. That was probably my favorite too.
I think I'm gonna share one with Summer. I think my favorite part was the plane. Like the whole experience in the plane really got to me. Like, I don't know, just maybe because at that time when I read the book, I was flying a lot. So I was like, oh man, like I could not imagine being stuck in like just flying in general. He has like another collaboration with another author where he writes stories about planes. But I don't know what it is about planes that it's such a big thing for me. Like it's not like a horror thing for me. Like I can fly. I'm not gonna freak out about it, but it is in the back of my mind. Like it's so scary to think like you're like so many feet in the sky, and this big old machine is transporting you. And machines kind of can be faulty at times. So like he's stuck in a big machine with drugs, and then everything just wasn't going for him. Like everything was against him. And then I was like, how the heck is he gonna get out of this? Like that was my thing. Like I love feeling so anxious. Even though I hate feeling anxious, I just love feeling anxious to feel, because I know it's not me in there, but I feel anxious towards the character, and I'm like, how is he gonna get out of this?
Well, my favorite part is actually a very long part. It's really when Eddie and Roland were together alone and they were walking, and the relationship that they formed together. Eddie was so funny. I mean, I just loved how hilarious he was, and how Roland really needed that. He needed that lightheartedness sometimes, and Eddie's personality, how it was so different from his, and the food. The different names for food, and him tasting the food. I love that also.
Yeah, the hot dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think my favorite scene is a little bit longer than Summer's even. It's from when Roland wakes up on the beach to the end when they're skinning the deer. No. No, I think I'm with I think Steve and Brandy that if I extend the scene from the gun store all the way to the drugstore, when the druggist can't believe that he's robbing him for for antibiotics. And then even like little things like when the gunslinger has to shoot, he like goes down and shoots from the hip so he won't hit anybody else, and he's just shooting the gun out of people's hands. Like he doesn't want to kill, even though he is a stone cold killer. Like even in these fast moving moments, he's calculated and he's thinking of life, and you kind of see a hero in there, even though sometimes he's kind of an anti-hero. You see that he has heroic tendencies, even just as instinct. And for runner-up, I would say it's the battle at Malazar's, with Eddie fighting stark raving naked, and having to control himself. Them trying to bait him with rolling Henry's head in, and the gunslinger seeing a glimpse of what Eddie could become. I love that just like sends like even just saying that sends like little goosebumps on me. But
That's so true. What Jeremy just said. That I'm pretty sure more than one time when he was driving. I mean, he was in a plane going to like I don't know, just to sign or to talk in a like talk about one of his books. He might have been like on drugs or something on a plane ride and have like the whole interaction with someone like seeing him and like I don't know. That's true, Jeremy.
Okay, I can't name any scene other than the ones
Oh,
you
that's
guys
not
already
fair.
talked about.
Oh,
I really enjoyed the book. I think meeting Odetta and Detta, the very brief time that you're in her head, like when he basically rolls himself to the changing room and then she disappears and the guy opens the door, he's like, where did she go? I thought that was funny, but not as funny as the gun store. But it's just like, go ahead. I was just saying that it just was constantly, every time, I didn't think this could get any better, and it just got better and better throughout the book.
Was anybody else, I don't want to say put off by the love scene between Eddie and Susanna, like their first night together? Because remember the description of Eddie, like he has like 3 cold sores, they've been like, they're just dirty, I think he has like covered in blood, and I mean, and here she's been in a chair for however long, and you know they've just been like sweating and they have to be like so dirty, and then it's like they made love.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of weird.
it's funny you say that, Summer. I did think in my mind, all of that aside, I thought BO. The BO has to be like through the roof. Like,
But I was thinking, like, I guess, I mean, just because they're dirty and sweaty, they have needs, I guess. I don't know.
I thought it was funny that Eddie kept saying he wanted to go back in to take a shower and get a burger. And you're like, yeah, no, you don't.
Oh yeah.
But we all do want you to go get a shower. So final thoughts. Let's wrap everything up. We're going to start with the newbies. So Steve, final thoughts on this book and give us your rating.
I really enjoyed it. It was a fun ride, and it was much different than the Gunslinger. And I had faith, but it was better than I expected. And I'm excited to continue. So for me, it was a solid 4. I think it was a 4. Really close to a 5. So, but it was about a 4.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm the same. I gave it a 4. I didn't want to give it a 5 in case there's one better than it. But because then where do I go? You know, I'm hoping that it's, and I hear that it's going to get better. So, but it was good. I really liked it. I had no idea what I was in for, what it was even going to be about. Having read Stephen King before, I can definitely see him in this book, but it's not like any Stephen King I've ever read. So I'm excited to keep going.
So before we move on to the other 3, do you think that your expectations were really low going into this, having not enjoyed the Gunslinger? And that may have increased your enjoyment.
I actually felt better after our discussion about the Gunslinger and then I went back and re-listened to it and read it again before I started this. So my expectations they're not as low, but I didn't know what it was going to be about. Which I love. I had no idea.
Yeah, I had pretty high expectations, I think, because everyone loves it, and I trust Jeff. So, yeah, I had high, I don't want to say high expectations, but I expected it to be good. It was better than I expected it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're going to leave you for last, Jeff, because this is like your 20th time reading the book. So Maza, did you actually reread it, or since you just read it recently, you didn't reread it again?
I skimmed through it, but I didn't reread it because it was so fresh in my mind. But I think now when I finished it and I put the book down, I give it 4 stars. I was like, I did kind of what Brandy was saying. Like I wanted to wait to see if other books come up in the series where I'm like, oh my god, this was just mind blowing. Like the book was good, but when I give a Stephen King 5 stars, I feel like I'm putting it with other high hitters in my opinion. That I'm just like, it's it was a really good book, and a 4-star rating is still really good. But to give it a 5-star, it would mean that when you pick this book up, you're just gonna like when you're finally done with it, you're gonna be mind blown. You're gonna be like, you're gonna be recommending it to everybody. But I feel like a solid 4 stars for this book is great, just because it's the second book in the series, and I feel like for me, if people pick up the Drawing of the Three, they're immediately gonna want to keep reading the Dark Tower just because it's that good. But for some reason, I just can't give it 5 stars just because it wasn't. Because when I do my ratings, I do a lot of journey, like how I'm feeling when I'm reading the book. It wasn't like an amazing journey. It was just pretty good journey. Like I enjoyed myself, but it was never like I need to keep picking this book up. I need to keep reading. I need to keep reading. I don't know if you guys found that to be different though.
Summer?
Yeah. So I love the book. It's my favorite in the series, but I gave it 4 stars also because it's a part of a series. It's like it's not complete to me. And I know that sounds silly, but yeah, I gave it 4 stars, even though I do love the book. And I think, I think everybody should read it.
Mm-hmm.
I did give it 4 stars.
And Jeff, we know you love it.
So first of all, I mean, who hurt you guys? Who hurt you? You can give out more than there's plenty of stars to go around. They're just like theoretical things. You give 10 stars if you want. To me, this is a 5-star book. This is one that when I had a weird entrance into the world of the Dark Tower. I read book 3 first, moved on to book 4, and then jumped back and did 1 and 2. And I remember when I did that, book 2 was just this gem. Like, how could I have missed all this? How did I pick up with book 3 with all of this adventure, all of this great thing? I've made it a secret. The Dark Tower is my favorite book series ever. So I'm just giving them all 5 stars. I'm just throwing the stars around. I'm not stingy with them like you guys, but
send me some stars, Jeff. You send me some stars.
I'll let you borrow some stars, some of my stars if you want them. If you're running low. But yeah, I think this one is such a big inspiration, just in terms of the total adventure, the idea of just point of view characters that are seeing things that you get to kind of experience our world through Roland's eyes, Roland's world through Eddie, and primarily Eddie's eyes, and just this idea of a fallible and a hero that is brought down. It's not the Superman, Silver Surfer, nothing can beat them hero. It's literally on death's door. And all of those elements just kind of like. It was just satisfying beginning to end. 5 stars.
Jeff, do you think that I was trying to do a video, or like I do have a video where I say like the Dark Tower, like how you're supposed to read it kind of thing. But I was thinking like now that I've actually read some of the books, don't you think it'd be a better order to, like, for example, like Steve and Brandy, wouldn't it have been a little bit better to have started with this book, and then when they're done with the series to go back and read the first book? Or do you think it's like completely no, like don't do that?
I think we tossed that around on the forums too, I think. And I still think I'm a completionist anyway, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask about this. But I think you do have to start with book 1. I think until you know how powerful Roland is and what's getting him on this quest, and you get to orient yourself in his world, you get a much stronger footing in his world before moving on to our world if you read the first book. Otherwise you don't get anything about Court and his dad and that Gunslinger is kind of where this thing of the past. Like, you get very little of that in this book. You get the beach. But my vote is you got to start with book 1. But I always say also finish with book 1.
Yeah. Or even just those little things that were funny about him trying Coke or sugar or hot dogs and saying cool, like, from the Gunslinger that they talk in a different way there. There were some things that were like our world, but not. I would have never known those things had I not read the Gunslinger. I wouldn't pick up on any of that.
Yeah, I think last time when we did the Gunslinger, we had this discussion, and I hadn't only read the Gunslinger, I would have said, hey, there's a good summary in the beginning of the second book, just skip it, but like I said, once I started reading this one, I was like, oh, wait a second, I need to go back And if at any time I could actually tell people you could skip it, then I wouldn't have needed to go back and reread parts, because there's no context on that summary. And so, when it says the oracle told him blah, 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 I was like, yeah, but what did the oracle say specifically? I had to go back and see, because that really is going to determine what happens here. And I want to be able to link those things together. So I would say no, but I would also encourage people who are going to read it as a caveat. It's like, this is by no means anything like the rest of the books. So if you don't like it, that doesn't mean you won't enjoy the rest. So I gave this 5 stars on Goodreads, because you can't do half stars. And it was not, to me, was not a 4-star book. It was better than a 4-star book. But it wasn't quite a 5-star, because it is only the second book in a series. So like Summer, I kind of agree. It's hard to give something 5 stars when it's just one book. It's not the whole story. If I read this by itself, I would have still enjoyed it. Would I have enjoyed it at 5 stars? Probably not. So you guys have anything else? Jeremy, I'm curious if you're still on. What did you give? What rating did you give the book? And while we're waiting for him to do that, I want to thank everybody for joining me today. I appreciate you taking 2 hours out of your morning to sit down and discuss this. I had a great time. I really enjoyed reading this book, and it was so much fun to discuss it with you guys. Also, everybody who, I'm sorry?
I just said thank you for having us.
Yeah, no problem.
It was Jeff who kind of encouraged us to read this. And so, Steve was like, hey, let's do it. 8 books, no problem.
Some people say encouraged. Other people say like bullied, insisted. Yeah, whatever, whatever you saw it.
I love how Steve went all out though. He went and bought the box set.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like I collected them individually, but Steve was like, no, I'm getting all of them at the same time.
I have to have them match, otherwise my OCD goes crazy.
Oh, I get you.
Yeah.
I'm weird.
So Jeremy says he gave it 3 stars. He says the book was insane. Did you guys discuss the language in it? So,
No,
I mean, this
not
book was
really.
written in the 80s. So I kind of forgave a lot of things that
Yeah.
probably today would be considered problematic. But you can't judge a book by its time. It just
I almost jumped on the forum just to say, oops, guys, just a little trigger warning. Just lots of the N-word and swearing and sex stuff, just FYI, because I'd kind of forgotten it.
Yeah.
That it's kind of washed out in my brain.
But I feel like it's more like art. You can't really judge art, like even if it's like you guys are saying, you can't judge it because of the time. But I feel like art. I feel like you have more of a creativity and more like of a thing to open yourself up and just not to say whatever you want, but in a sense you can say whatever you want because it's art. You can't really like filter or cancel art just because they say something. It's like it's part of a book, and it gives it a more of a vivid feel to include all those things, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like would have taken away from hearing about Detto's experiences. You know what I mean? I just feel like you would have lightened it when that was something that was serious that was going on at that time. I mean, it was what, 1959, I think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That she was her time. So, I mean, and she had both experiences. She had the experience of, being wealthy and also the whole racism. So
Yeah, I think that you can't appreciate what she's been through without seeing the horrific things that were said to her or in that time.
And I will say, this is one of the things where I don't remember where I said it or where it is, but when they were doing the movie, even before I saw how horrific the movie was, the casting of Idris Elba was a little problematic to me in that regard because, and I love Idris Elba, and I would watch him read the phone book, but if you're going to truly do justice to the relationship between Roland and Odetta and Detta, he was a honk muffa, and part of Detta's mistrust of him and why he was so evil was because of his color, and that completely goes away with the way they cast that movie. And thank goodness it flopped, and they won't be going that direction anymore. But
well, I didn't watch it, but I was really worried. I thought, well, if they do that with Roland, because imagine Roland in the desert coming into that town, or going back to Detta's time, the 1950s, him walking in, I mean, in history, things would have been very different. And I thought, well, what are they going to do with Susanna? Who would they cast for her? Are they going to completely change everything? Because if you take away her identity, then what do you do to the character?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Well, she could be a cracker. Sorry.
That would make all of Deda's dialogue really confusing.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, thank you to those who are watching, those of you guys who joined me today. We will be having our discussion of the Wastelands. I wrote this down and I forgot my notes. I'll put it in the description so you guys can come back and check that out. But for all the information about this series group read, you can find that on creepingdeath.org. The link is in the description already. Go check that out. The calendar's there. That live discussion will again be on my channel. And I really look forward to seeing all of you again here and maybe more. I think there are some others that are going to join us for the third book. So thanks again for coming. I'm already ready to start the third one. I don't know about you guys. I can't wait.
Yes.
And then if we're gonna read the third one, we have to read this one too, don't we? Like,
Oh,
Charlie Choo Choo.
yeah, here we go.
maybe right before the fourth one, between 3 and 4, we'll go with a Charlie Choo Choo.
Like, have a whole discussion for it and everything.
And seeing the little 6-shooters at the bottom of the screen here makes me think of Godless. So another plug for Creeping Death forums. Come and watch Godless with us on Netflix.
Yes, Godless is next week. Next Sunday, we'll be discussing that. So go check it out. The trailer is in the creepingdeath.org forum. So you can go check out the trailer and see if it's something that you want to watch. All right. Well, that's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
For having
Thanks,
us.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.